How's everybody doing today? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to my Sunday live stream where we talk about photography and catch up on how everybody's doing and what we've been up to. News in the market. There's been quite a bit, I guess, the last couple of weeks with announcements from all System with their new OM1 Mark II and their 150 to 600, and also the 918, which is basically just a cosmetic change. Excuse me. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and also just in general, uh, what's been going on with my channel lately. For many of you, nothing's really changed much, right? It looks pretty much the same. But I am going to transition this year. I'm going to try to say this every year, but I'm really going to try and do some more vlogging and talk more about photography and less about gear. I'll always try to answer questions as usual. About very specific things and settings and things. But uh, yeah, I'd really like to talk about more about photography and improving photography, my journey and improving my own photography. So I've been watching a lot more Peter's channel, Peter Forsgar, because he lately he has been doing more about photography and always looking for inspiration around the around YouTube for different types of photography. And what I found was I've been doing a lot of these self-portraits because I wanted to get really good at lighting and experimenting with different kinds of lighting, whether it's flash or LED. So I plan on doing more videos about lighting setups and how I light things and products that I use to light things. Because really, what I found was in photography, and like I said, I'm still new to photography. Okay, I've been doing this not even a decade yet, like 9 years, maybe 10 now that we're in 2024, but uh, not quite yet. It was around May of 2013 that I started, I guess. So it has been 10. But anyway, many of you have decades of experience, and there's really no substitute for that in photography. Let me switch over to my chat window. Sorry, I meant to show that. But and the other thing is, you're seeing a lot of product reviews lately. I'm not really doing any more than I normally do, like when people send me stuff to review, but it just seems like this winter everybody's contacting me to promote stuff, right? And I'll take lenses and lighting products. I really don't have too much of the other stuff. I get offers for other things that are photography related. Um, but I'm trying to focus on lenses and lighting, and specifically for my other system formats like my Sony and my Fuji. So you'll see some more of that, and you'll see definitely some more lighting products coming. Because when it comes to photography, lighting is always number one, right? And number two is your lenses. Number three is the camera itself, right? When it comes to the quality of the images that you create. So if you have very good lighting, whether it's natural light or artificial light, you're going to get your photography is going to be better. Then lenses have a direct impact on the quality of that image. Whether you want something less than perfect that is, has some character to it, or if you want something clinically perfect, right? When you're doing things that would require that, like product photography, architectural photography, a lot of times you need that clinical perfection, no distortion, vignetting, no aberration. Astrophotography, you need very clinical precision. Uh, but in things like street photography and everyday stuff, sometimes you might prefer that imperfect lens, right? Like a kit lens, where it gives you a certain amount of softness or glow or flare or, weird bokeh, weird out of focus areas. These kind of lenses can be a lot of fun too. So photography is really all about those things. And then the camera, is there's nothing changed. Whether we're talking about a film camera, digital camera, pinhole cameras, whatever. This is kind of the bottom of the barrel when it comes to improving your photography, or the last thing you need to think about. Uh, so that's kind of what I've come to learn over time that I've been doing this. Many of you have realized a long time ago, I understand. But for me, this was kind of a realization I came to after studying or looking at works of timeless type photography, the Cartier-Bressons, the Joseph Karsh, and more modern people like Platon, and even like Lindsay Adler, I'm sorry, um, and Joe Edelman, looking more modern living day photographers and their work is, they, if you want to know what kind of cameras and gear they used, uh, that's very difficult to find sometimes, and it changes a lot. I was looking at one photographer, and I saved their images on my computer as just pins so I can reference them later, and study the lighting, the composition, the feeling, the mood, kind of communication or story that they're trying to tell. And once in a blue moon, the image will have the exit date in it, where I can actually see the camera and gear that they used. And I was surprised. I don't know why I was should, but I was surprised. There was like uh, an Olympus EM1 Mark One, 12 to 40 Pro was and this was a photographer that was shooting on the set of Mad Men, that TV series that was out a few years ago. And that's a very interesting show to watch uh, visually, because I think the first 4 or 5 seasons, I don't quote me on this, but they shot that on film. They actually used real film to film the episodes. Uh, so it's very interesting to see the early episodes, the earlier seasons before I think they did transition to digital eventually. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments exactly. I can't remember. I read it somewhere. So I bought the first season of Mad Men just to watch it, because when you're doing film photography or film moving pictures versus doing still photography, you have to be very conscious of lighting constantly, right? There's no correcting in post, so to speak, especially if you're shooting in film. So the amount of effort that went into the shooting of that and lighting is, tremendous, and that is all about that show. Watching it is all about the lighting and the lenses that they used, because the film is irrelevant, right? The film is just the capture medium, and that's going to contribute to the colors uh, in general. But if it was black and white, for example, then uh, still the lighting and the images that you see in that show are really amazing. What they were able to accomplish, knowing that they didn't do there was no digital manipulation really to speak of. Um, but anyhow, there's that, and that's why when a lot of people ask me about what camera system they should get, because they're looking at everything, right? Not just Micro Four Thirds. My advice was find the lens that you want first, right? Does this camera, do some research on the lenses for each camera system and find the lens that you think is going to give you the best, right? And that's going to take a lot of work. There's a lot of groundwork involved there, because you have to watch a lot of different videos. Maybe you can borrow the lens potentially once you've narrowed down your choices, or rent them with the gear and try them out, because the lenses can make all the difference in the world. And certainly did with, for example, I was shooting with my Fujifilm. All I had when I bought the camera was like the 18 to 55 kit lens, which is wonderful lens. It works beautifully on that camera, but I wanted a halo lens. I wanted a lens that clinically perfect for that camera because it's a 40 megapixels. So I looked and researched and ended up on the 33 1.4 as my halo lens because it's at the focal length that I prefer, around a 50 millimeter, the nifty 50. And uh, everyone reviewed it. It was, near perfect, right? Technically speaking. I wasn't looking for character. I was looking for technical perfection. And I can add a lot of character in post processing. But when I want to have fun, the other lenses in that system that I bought are not great. Like I bought the 55 to 200 zoom lens for it, and everybody says, "Oh, I should have got the 70 to 300." I get it, I get it, but it was like a few $100 more, and um, it started at 70 millimeters. I didn't really want to start at 70. I wanted to start at 55. So I had something very similar to my current lens, 40 to 150 on my Olympus. And anyway, but I know that's not a perfect lens, and I got some criticism about when I was comparing is with the 40 to 150 kit lens from Olympus and the 55 to 200 lens from, which is kind of their kit lens from Fuji, how the images look virtually identical, even though one is 20 megapixels and one is 40 megapixels. It's virtually impossible to tell the difference, whether you're pixel peeping for fine detail or looking at the overall bokeh and rendering. The images are virtually identical. I got some criticism. One was, I should have used the 70 to 300 to compare. Okay, maybe I'd get more detail resolved, but yeah, and that's not the lens that I cared about so much. What I worried about more was the focal length. Does it have the focal length that I need, and is it reasonably good? Like the 18 to 55 kit lens, the 55 to 200. Those are sort of what go around my 33 millimeter prime. And, those lenses can be just reasonably good. I don't care about everything else. Like on my Olympus systems, and if you can, it's around 250 bucks, give or take all day long for the Leica 25 millimeter 1.4. If you like the 50 millimeter equivalent, that lens is gold. I mean, the images that I get from that, every time I look at them, rendering is just amazing. Uh, and I can't put my finger on it if it's the color or the way it renders the background because it's a little bit shallower depth of field than anything else I have for my thirds. That focal length. I have the 1.8s and the 1.7s, and it is sharp. It's sharp, especially if you stop it down. It is but that lens, man, got to get that lens. 250 bucks on the used market. I think they're like 600 new for version 2. If you need the weather sealing, I think you might pay 350 on the market if you want the weather sealing. But that's kind of my halo lens for my Micro Four Thirds system, right? Because mm, so and the other focal length I like is 28. But so yeah, bottom line is find the lenses that system, and then find the camera that has the features that you need. So that kind of brings me to all right, let me check the chat. Let me stop here and look at the chat because I just saw I was just eyeballing. Oh my goodness, Robin is here. David Crooks, good to see you. Good to see you, Robin. Always good to see you. Let's see, Marsha, good to see you. Roger, Darko, Gomez. Let's see if I had any questions here. Plato, good to see you. David Tellett, yes, it is raining today and it's cold. I forgot to turn my heater on. I think it's about 17 Celsius right now in the house. They're cold, but let me turn on my heater so that at least in a little bit it'll be warmer. Here we go. And uh, yes, Bob, I'm doing well. Thank you, Bob O'Neill. And a question from Darko. It says, Rob, do you feel in the future the more mid-range cameras will have bird AF and tracking for enthusiasts, or will it continue to be only high-end cameras? Uh, if you're talking about Olympus, Panasonic, I hope they bring it down to the other cameras because everyone else is. You look at like a Canon R10, R7. Those are kind of mid-range APS-C cameras. Have this Canon R8, the full frame. These are all entry-level mid-range cameras. They all have like different tracking mode subject. And I'm not as familiar with the other systems. I mean, I have a Sony, but that's a high-end camera. Uh, it has everything, but it wouldn't hurt. It would require putting the same processor, right, into the cameras, enough memory for it to work well, as well as the new OM1 Mark II. Even if it worked like the OM1 Mark I, the OM1 Mark I, and I'll come back to my thoughts on the OM1 Mark II. It was amazing, the autofocus for birds and trains and planes and all of that. Uh, I hope so, but I don't know. I don't know if it would. The mistake, I think, and I think this is because they just don't have the financial robustness, larger companies like Sony and Canon, right, to put out 20 different cameras uh, that all do the same thing basically at various triple levels, right? um, I think if they had the financial robustness to introduce multiple cameras, they could do it. Because you can walk into a camera store and they have a camera at every single price point. You're looking at Canon or Sony, right? You want to get in at 500 bucks, you want to get in at 800 bucks, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 8,000, whatever you want to spend. They have cameras at everything there, right? Olympus or OM Systems, I should say, we have OM1, OM5. And for them to, what they really, honestly, I don't think the OM10, like an EM10 replacement, makes any sense when you can buy Sonys and Canons in the $500-600 range that are, small and compact. What possibly could the EM10 or OM10 offer over what's already on the market? Better image stabilization, right? But the compromise is going to be in overall image quality because it's just physics, right? A larger sensor is going to have better image quality. Certainly, Micro Four Thirds is good, more than good enough, right? But that doesn't cut it when you're trying to break into a market. You have to be the best or better. So if you come in with something with a perceived lower image quality with minimal advantages over the current things on the market at that price point, it's not going to make it. Now, they could introduce some specialty cameras. Yeah, they just don't have the financial robustness research, I think, in my opinion, to do that. They need to focus on mid-range like the OM5 and the OM1. Now, what I'd like to see them do is introduce an OM1R, OM1S. So the OM1S would be video-centric. OM1R would be resolution landscape type. So 40 megapixel sensor, whatever, high res, just everything a landscape photographer would want, very specialized things. And then the S would be video, everything a videographer would want. As Panasonic's doing that, right? They have their GH series, and then they have their G9 series. Now, granted, the G9 is very close to what GH6 can do, but not quite, right? The H series is a little more specialized. Um, and then Fuji has the same theory where they have like their 40 megapixel XH2, and then they have an XH2S, their sports camera, uh, focus more on sports. I guess it's a faster camera. But every company seems to be, well, these companies seem to be separating their cameras. Although they're virtually identical, they're just a little bit different, right? A little bit specialized. I think that's something OM System could do without too much overhead on their R&D. They certainly know how to make cameras, right? And they could use the same body, same battery, same everything, but just a little bit of firmware and hardware and a little bit of firmware and hardware changes. That's just those two pieces. That's one of the smallest parts of R&D, honestly, because they're just buying things off the shelf, right? Sensors and hardware. But the software development, yeah, there's a lot of money there. But there's also a lot of money in designing the camera body and the ergonomics. Uh, having buttons and dials and everything all different. But if they came out with a camera with the same exact body, just a little bit more specialized, I think they could do that, and I would love to see that. And there's no one camera that can do it all. If you're going to bump up the resolution, you're going to compromise something else. Uh, so, you bump up resolution, you potentially compromise dynamic range and noise performance and speed, all kinds of things, right? I could see it. I could see where they could do that because if they were to make a video camera, they could use a lower resolution sensor. So they might save a little money there on the sensor and then improve the low light performance. Put like the GH5, I forget what model it was. There was a GH5 that had a 12 megapixel micro four thirds sensor in it. They could focus on that. They could do it, I think. Maybe start with a landscape camera, then introduce a video camera later. Really, Panasonic dominates video for the most part, and that's going to be a tough nut to crack to take over Panasonic and Sony and all the other ones and offer something very competitive. But anyway, there's all that. I'd love to see that, and then maybe one halo camera, one specialty camera like the NF2, and then the OM5 that needs to be updated quite a bit. The current OM5 is an excellent camera. It's basically a baby EM1 Mark III, so excellent autofocus, uh, great performance from the sensor, great EVF, very compact size and lightweight. But I think if they change the form factor back to a metal body, uh, just for the tactile feel of having a metal camera like the Nikon ZF, right? Nobody liked the Nikon ZFC, but he loves the Nikon ZF. I guarantee if the ZFC came in a metal body, uh, it wouldn't have got so much hate. Because I picked that thing up. I think I mentioned this when it first came out in one of my streams. I was like, ooh, yeah, this feels cheap, like something you'd buy off of AliExpress or some knockoff camera. But the ZF, man, that thing is a solid block, right? Brass dials and everything. That's kind of their halo camera. That's kind of their one unique camera. Uh, and from what I understand, it's doing very well. So I think if OM Systems came out with a metal OM5 Mark II, that's at all possible anymore. I understand the manufacturing is the retooling to do the manufacturing for a metal camera. Uh, would be a lot of work when they already have the OM5 in place. But we may not see that happen. But the OM5, if it can get updated with the OM1 uh, processing and features and everything, and have some other improvements, especially that bottom plate, man. That is their Achilles heel. People are constantly reporting this. I mean, I don't think it's a widespread problem, and that's why I always put a metal brace on the bottom. Like this is my Sony. I always get a full plate on the bottom. I don't care if you have a, if it's not a problem on this camera. I've seen people break their tripod mount on every camera brand. You'll see stories of that everywhere, and it's always the user's fault. But I think in the case of the OM5, uh, it technically could be the user's fault, right, for using it. But if you use it, it shouldn't break so easily, right? And thank you, Kostov. I really appreciate that. The super chat helps me out a lot. um, and that is great because well, I just took forever to talk about Darko's question there, but uh, what do y'all think about this recently reviewed snoot? Oh, okay. I love it. I bought one before they sent me this other one, and I didn't use it much because it was too heavy. And it was, I have one pro grade LED light, but all the rest of mine are not pro grade. They're consumer level type lighting products, heavy. But this new one, I'm going to try and do some flower or macro photography using it today. Since it's raining outside, I thought I'd do some indoor stuff after the stream. So maybe I'll post some stuff on my community page or Instagram of the flowers. Somebody gave me roses for Valentine's. So everyone, happy Valentine's Day if I don't talk to you again before then. So uh, anyhow, see. Down. John Allen is here. Andrew Banner, good to see you. It's always great to see everyone come into these live streams, the usual suspects. But if there's anyone new here, let me know. I'd love to know if there's anyone new to my streams because I really try to. Honestly, I don't know what I do on my streams. I sit down, I turn the camera on, and I just jibber jabber for 2 hours somehow. Unlike Robin and Jimmy, they have very very specific topics, right, that they talk about. And I just can't prep and do all of that. I don't know. I say good to see you from Finland. Let's see. David Crooks. David hosted the Flickr 20th anniversary. I posted some images on my Flickr page and my Instagram that I took yesterday for that. We went on a photo walk in his photo club there. Let's see. He's comparing the 150 to 600 versus the 150 to 400. And okay. I'll come back to that a little bit. I'll talk about the lenses a little bit. I do have some thoughts on that. Grape says, I appreciate the refocus. I wish that there were more photography videos. Thank you. I'm going to try. What I'm going to probably start out is the easy stuff, right? Take out a specific focal length, talk about what I see, how I'm composing images, and the shots that I ended up really liking, the keepers, versus some of the shots that didn't work out so well, why I didn't think they worked so well. And everyone's going to have their own vision of the world and uh, experience, right? Our past experience influence our current experience. So, I'm going to try to elaborate as much as I can on those aspects because a lot of times I might take a picture of something because it reminds me of something of my past and, just stirs up that emotion. and attachment to whatever subject I'm photographing. And everyone else, it might be like, why'd you take a picture of that? What's so interesting? I can elaborate and say, well, I really like this particular flower because, you know, well, I'm going to get emotional about it if I start talking about flowers, ironically. I'm not going to talk about that. I'll do it in a video when I can do cuts when I'm not crying. But, I want to try to, uh, and thereby helping you to find things for you to photograph that you think are interesting and have a connection to. And hopefully you're better able to make that connection with whoever's looking at your image so that even though they didn't have the same experience as you, whatever that subject is you're taking, they can see your story and see who you are through your photography. That's what I'm going to try and project going forward is who am I as a person, as a human being, have my photography try to reflect that. Because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in photography, right? The sunset, sunrise, dawn. And if you got good photography set of skills, you can do these kinds of images. And if you have the dedication, like somebody like Thomas Heaton that can climb mountains twice for the sake of YouTube, but he does climb the mountains and hikes forever and looks at us. Anyway, there's a lot of effort and planning involved as well. But all of these things are skill sets that anyone can accomplish. And if that's what you want to do and what brings you joy and satisfaction, enjoy this craft. Enjoy photography for everything that it can do for you personally. But I'm trying to express my photography a little differently, right? So we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking on my butt, and execution is a whole different thing because a lot of times photography still requires a lot of planning and effort, practice. Uh, that's why I really like to look at um, the past works of people that have decades of work behind them and have been curated to what they thought, or maybe some curator thought. I rather look at images that were curated by the photographer themselves, right? Rather than somebody that curates the image for them. Like a good example is Vivian Mayer. Somebody just found bought a box of negatives, and then they curated the images on her behalf because she was passed, right? But personally, I'd rather look at those. And when I look at those images, decades behind them, this goes beyond skill set, right? It goes beyond effort. It goes beyond everything. Oops. It goes beyond everything else that we associate with photography, especially here on YouTube, because YouTube is so dedicated to, the more popular videos are gear orientated because people are trying to make buying decisions. We're a very consumer orientated society in general, at least the people on YouTube that watch YouTube, that those are the kind of videos that get a lot of hits. And then there's a few exceptions, but generally videos about photography don't do as well. The photographic eye is a clear exception. The art of photography, a clear exception. Sean Tucker is a good exception. There's exceptions everywhere. There's people that do that very well and articulate very well uh, things that are about photography. But generally speaking, not quite as popular. Uh, but that's where I'm going to go, and I suspect that that's my next level or next phase in my journey in photography, drawing on the experience of people that have decades, coming to that and going beyond what is everything else that's done, right? And trying to find my own voice and my own expression so that when people look at my photos, you get a sense of who I am. Because this hit me when I was watching, now I forgot his name. I was watching or looking at a photographer's photos, and then I watched an interview of that photographer. I was like, oh my goodness, that guy is exactly like his photos. And by looking at his photos, I was looking at him. And I didn't know it until I actually saw him in an interview. And I was like, man, this guy, amazing. And maybe I'm overthinking it, right? But I'm going to try and find more examples of that. Looking at a photo, then I look at maybe if there's footage available of the photographer interviews or speaking. I get a better feel of how their photography seems so timeless, right? And you know, uh, word I'm looking for. But timeless images basically. And sometimes there was another one where it was just the daughter talking about her mother, who was the photographer, because the mother had already passed. I don't think they had any video or interview of her. So the daughter spoke about her, and that was a very interesting perspective too. I wish I could share with you. I just can't remember the names of Marco. Good to see you. Happy Sunday. I'm so glad you're here. Really enjoyed some of the selfie photos with the M5 Mark II. Do you ever use it for video purposes? Yes. If you watch the video that I did on the optical snoot, right, my last video, I did that with the M5 Mark III and the 14 to 42 kit lens. And I shot it in 4K 30, uh, natural color profile. And all I did in post-processing was just a slight tweak on the white balance because the background in that video is gray. So I just put the eyedropper on that, and that's really the only post-processing I did. Other than I had to crop. The first half of that video was mostly 4K video cropped in, so the quality is not great because I was cropping at least 50%. And then the second half of the video, I was like, well, if I'm going to crop in, I might as well zoom in. So the second half of the video, I actually zoomed the lens in to like 25 or 30 millimeters so that I didn't have to crop it in post-processing. And then you might notice a slight improvement in the image quality because I was optically achieving the focal length that I wanted rather than cropping in. Um, if it's even possible to tell on YouTube, I can see it when I was editing. I was like, man, I cropped in. It's not perfect, but who cares about the ultimate image quality of my videos? It's about the optical snoot. It's not about me. So I don't care if I'm perfectly sharp. But if you look at the video about halfway down, that's when I said, I might as well just crop in. I'm not using the whole frame. So yeah, I use it for a lot, and I'm sure some of the other videos I did use that camera. So if you see a video, the more recent videos, if you see a more recent video where I have the gray backdrop behind me, that is with the EM5 Mark III. So I have another video I did. It was for the Molis, the Giant G200, the LED light, the G200 light. I used the EM5 Mark III and 14 to 42 kit lens. And I think I recorded that actually in 1080p. I didn't even use 4K video on that one, on the M5. So there's two examples of recent ones I've done. I do it for my channel because I have that camera mounted on like permanently as a fixture in my home studio. So I use it for my photography when I'm doing the self-portraits in the studio with the kit lens. And I also use it for doing my YouTube videos if I'm going to do like a talking head or product review that I can do indoors. I'll use it for that. And I've been shopping for getting another one, but I can get one for like 500-600 bucks. It's a pain to unrig my setup in my studio just so I can use that EM5 like in the field. And my EM10 is rigged here. That's what I'm using now for the live streams. EM10 Mark II. But yeah, so those are two examples. I haven't used it for video outside though so much. Usually when I'm outside, I just use my I'll show you. I just use this little Insta360. I know Robin Wong hates this camera, but I use this one outside. So if I'm in low light, bad, but in good light, it's good enough for vlogging, right? And stuff. I really have to. I think I got the audio nailed down finally. Hopefully, the audio on this stream is pretty good. Outside of what YouTube might be messing up, but anyway, that's what I use. I haven't noticed this, but Gray Babe says I've noticed that many YouTubers are redoing really basic videos like what is exposure, aperture, and shutter speed. If they are, and I might need to do this as well, but a lot of times when videos get a few years old, like my last aperture video is 2, 3 years old, and let's say I got two videos, right, both about aperture, and I have one that's 3 years old and one that's 2 years old, but it's the same content. The one that's newer is going to get more clicks than the one that's older. So it's sort of a I think it's more about uh, being relevant modern day, right? Because a lot of people don't understand that things like aperture, shutter speed, ISO, these things, are pretty much the same since cameras, started, right? The concepts or principles of that, but there is a growing trend, and I think Joe Edelman is definitely on the leading edge of this, where you look at ISO as just adjusting the brightness. And he has a quote like, "Choose your aperture with heart, shutter speed with a purpose, and your ISO for brightness." I can't remember the quote exactly, but that's really a good way to think about it. Um, is aperture is about creative choice, right? Do you want shallow depth of field, deep depth of field? And then shutter speed is purpose, right? If you're trying to stop freeze motion or show motion blur, whatever, right? Use these two things, and then the ISO you just adjust for the brightness. Uh, when you're talking about capturing images, that makes a lot of sense when you're doing photography. I saw another YouTube channel that was quoting the same idea. They expressed it a little differently, but the concept was the same, that ISO is for our digital cameras. ISO is about adjusting the brightness of the exposure, and the other settings are for purpose or creative choices, right? Now, I understand there's exceptions, all over the place for that. But for general photography, it makes a lot of sense. Hi, I'm a Nikon fan for years. Unfortunately, just like everyone, I'm getting old and the heavy equipment is becoming too much. Budget-wise, I'm torn between second-hand Fuji or Olympus. Uh, well, overall, the Olympus Micro Four Thirds are going to be smaller and lighter. I'll give you an example. Um, Not a great example, but this is um, this is the 40 to 150 kit lens. This is the 55 to 200 for Fuji. This is the Olympus one. They are effectively the same lens, same image quality, same focal length. This one's a little brighter, so that's partially why it's bigger. But for the most part, these are functionally the same, right? And then here's the here's my Fuji XH2. Awesome camera. Here's my Olympus OM1 with 50 millimeter equivalent lenses. And the lens, this one has the lens hood retracted on it. Let me just take the lens hoods off. They don't really add any weight. Okay, so here is, see now they look how much bigger the Fuji looks, right? This is a 33 1.4. This is a 25 1.4. So I'm getting equivalent focal lengths. Now this one has the base plate on it. The OM1, I'm still torn about what base plate I should get for it after all these years. There's one by Really Right Stuff that I like, but it's like $100. And at $100, I'm thinking maybe I should get the small rig cage that goes around. I'm kind of leaning towards that because I do video with this camera for my pro work. Oh, and you can't see anything when I'm holding it like that. Let me hold it up like this. Now the XT5 is probably closer to the size of the OM1, right? But this XH2 looks ginormous next to the Olympus, right? And it feels ginormous comparedly. So when I put, and just imagine putting these lenses on top of it. So yeah, Fuji overall. Let me just give you this one more example. These are both 50 millimeter 1.4 equivalents, right? But technically this is a 33 1.4, this is a 25 1.4, but in terms of field of view, it's on 50, why isn't it focusing there? Focusing on my face. Okay, there we go. It really wants to focus on my face, but you get the idea. I'll just put it closer to my face. There's a substantial difference here in size, right? So now differences in image quality. If you pixel peep 40 megapixels of the XH2 or XT5, or if you're looking even at the 26 megapixel XT3 and older Fujis, they are going to be so. But if that's important to you, yeah, the Fuji is going to resolve a little more and have a little less noise. You start pushing the camera's limits and the higher ISOs and things. But I think the size, weight, form factor, pricing, and everything of the Olympus outweighs the advantages that the Fuji may have. So I would say, if you're looking at used Fujis and Olympuses, Fuji XT3 or Olympus EM1 Mark II, those would probably be really, really very good budget choices. The XT3 is going for around $700-800, but they have a lot of great pancake lenses, like the 27. I think it's 27, the 23, the 18. They have a bunch of great pancake-sized lenses where you don't have to buy these 1.4s like I did. But it just depends where you want to go. So this is where I kind of go back to my original advice: is find the lens that is going to be your halo lens, the lens that you're going to use the most often. You're going to use every single day, and then you can buy all the El Cheapo or the cheaper, smaller ones and all the other focal lengths. So with all the custom modes right on here, I really like this XH2 form factor. And it has the grip built in already, because if I buy the XT3, most likely I'm going to have to buy a grip for it if I was going to use it all the time. But I didn't have to, I think between the XT5 and XH2, this is the better choice. For me, much better choice. I love this top plate. This if this camera didn't have this top plate LCD here, I wouldn't have bought into Fuji at all, probably. I probably went Nikon or Canon that have these top plates. But anyhow, I think ultimately, for all, the Olympus Micro Four Thirds system is going to give you smaller lenses at equivalent focal lengths than but you know, it's a trade-off, a little bit of a trade-off there. I hope that helps. Then what brand wide angle? Manual focus lens, Rokinon, Lao, etc. Low price would you recommend? Not fisheye, but also for astrophotography. Not a good person to ask. I don't use any of, I've never used any of those for astrophotography, but what you want to look for when you're looking for reviews on these kinds of lenses for astro, one of the most important things is coma, right? This kind of like weird effect going around the stars or egg shape. Look look for a good place to go is the Facebook astrophotography group. I have it bookmarked and you can ask there and they'll tell you what good lens to use. They use Micro Four Thirds. I'll put a link in the description here in the chat. So this is the Facebook for photography group. That is a great place to ask. Very, very helpful people group there. They do like it's the Micro Four Thirds astrophotography group, and they'll give you a good answer to that. I cannot. The lens I do more deep sky astrophotography, so I can tell you the 300 millimeter f4 is awesome for that. The 75 1.8. Another good person to ask, maybe you can leave a comment on their channel, is Ben. Because he uses Micro Four Thirds, but I don't know if he uses those small lenses. So that's why he didn't come to mind first. Narrow band. This is another. Just leave a comment on any of his recent videos. The same question. He might have a good answer for you as well. But yeah, I don't have a good answer. I would just be guessing if I said anything. Wow, so many comments here. Roberto's here. Good to see you. Yeah, it's like early morning there. Um, okay. Love Jeff Painter. Yeah, Jeff Painter. I think it was a DP for a lot of films that you guys have probably seen before. Vision cameras and lenses. I bet. I hope you're doing well, Jeff. And JM Cart says, "Hey Rob, B&H has a deal all month on the G9 II where you trade in any working film or digital camera and get dollars for that camera plus $500 off." Wow, that's amazing. That's good to know. I'm not personally, I'm not interested in the G9 II. I have an OM1 already, and it doesn't offer anything that I would really or want to spend any extra money for. If I was in the video more, like doing video grading and stuff, I'd probably get one, but my OM1 is more than enough. specifically because it does 4K 60, 420 10-bit internal. And that's all I needed to kind of get rid of my Panasonic gear because I had a Panasonic S5. And there's just no reason to keep it when the OM1 got these new specs. I do miss my S1R, my Panasonic S1R. I mean, I didn't have it for very long. I might have to get one again, maybe this summer. Uh, Somehow the images that it rendered, number one, the L mount system has awesome lenses. They're 85, 50, 35. That trio of primes is amazing. Amazing value for money. You can get those lenses, all of them well under $1,000. Like the 50 prime I paid 300 bucks for. Sale with some other deals. The 85 and the 35 are more than that, but you can get all three lenses for like maybe 1,500 bucks for all three. And then you get the any L mount camera. And you have an amazing system. But the lenses are what draws me to that system. But then the camera, the S1R, kind of amplified what those lenses can do because it was resolving all 47 megapixels beautifully. Colors are amazing. Kind of miss that camera. Anyway, I think if you do video work, that's definitely something to jump on the G9 II. There's a channel called Geeky Nerdy Tech. I think that's the one where he uses the G9 II and the S5 II side by side. He prefers the G9 II for when he needs more depth of field. S5 doesn't. A side by side comparison, and the video quality out of those cameras are just Olympus can't even come close. Good enough for what I use, but you're serious about your video work. I was doing a lot more video work beyond what I jobs that I get in video anymore. And seriously considered a G9 too, but I don't. I haven't had a video job in months, so I just use it for myself. G5 and like Panasonic, my only concern is I have almost all Ollie glass, including the 1745, 12 to 40, 30 macro. Nothing with sync is. There's more here, I guess. Nothing with sync IS. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you're hand holding the camera a lot, yeah, the sync IS is a big deal. He says, I also use the Kodak CT350 and X2T wireless trigger. Your thoughts on this would work? Yes, it'll work with the G9 too. I'm watching your videos on cross making lenses and bodies. I'm only using them for photography. Yeah, those will work. That's why I bought in the Panasonic originally. I had all Kodak's Olympus gear, and it all worked. I have the 25 1.7, excellent value for money. Not as sharp as the 25 1.4 though, not by a long shot, but and Marco says, see, thank your off mark on the M10. The deficiency you mentioned have been there forever, yet the M10 is the best-selling model in some markets forever. Yes. I I know. Uh that's true. That's true, Marco. I think you're right. I don't I don't know. I would love to be proven wrong on that though. If they introduce an OM10 and it does really well, nothing would make me happy. 5 OM1, what else did they have? NF, which is kind of the pen line, but it was kind of its own thing. They had a pretty good range at all different price points. don't think OM system has the financial robustness doing that. It's not just about that one model. But maybe they can. I don't know. David agrees with Marco. So I'm in the minority. It's okay. One person, one opinion, right? It doesn't mean anything. Maybe I should just do a poll on my channel, right? Say how many people think the OM10 would be their best next camera to introduce. I'll put a list there. OM5 was reinforced. Have seen very few reports on the OM5. The M5 III is a different story. That's good. That's good to know. That's true. I haven't really heard much about the OM5 problem. I did see one. There's always one guy, though, right? But it was more prevalent on the M5. Oh, yeah. I asked a long time ago. Hi, Hugo. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. I hope you're still here. And Marcus Ratzo, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Always good to see new people. Jay says, I'm getting in the drone photo video along with the OM1. How do you import and catalog all the files from your various sources? Oh my God, my importing is still a train wreck. But I use Adobe Bridge. Generally speaking, I use Adobe Bridge to bring everything in chronologically by year, by quarter, and then by day. And then for each day, I label it. And then within uh, Photolab 7, I use projects. I keep messing up my project folder, but that's how I do it. I'll see if I can just share a quick screen. I'll answer this question real quick while that's loading. Eric's asking, in your recent Roaring 20 self-portraits, I know lighting was a lot, but no, there wasn't a lot of post-processing. Since I'm pulling it up, I'll show you the before and afters. I messed up my catalog again. The timing of this question about how do I import is very unfortunate because somehow I deleted an entire folder, everything in 2024 out of Lightroom, because I use Lightroom also. And then I had to resync it. It's probably still resyncing right now. Started that last night. And then it messed up all of my project folders in Photolab. um, so here's, I have a project folder. This is mainly for my YouTube stuff. But I have a folder here, and I break this down by year first, and then by year, let me show you 2023. By year, I break it down by quarter, and then within each quarter, I break it down by date, and then for each day, I put in a name for what that is. So I can pretty much find anything I want pretty quick, because I have to remember what quarter I shot something in, or if I have to go back many years, I have to remember what year I shot it in. So that's where this kind of structure falls apart. So what I've started doing is I started using this projects folder down here, and a lot of photos got deleted out of my things. But I have where I put my favorite photos. Yeah, this got lost. But I destroyed my entire structure yesterday. But I try and break things down. Here, my studio portraits. When I set up projects, it what um, doesn't matter what folder I import them into, because I can assign it to a specific project. So I can make a project called drone shots, and then I could break the drone shots down into either location or subject, things like that. And I'm trying to organize things that way. And in addition to that, you don't have to have one picture in one project. You can put that one picture into multiple folders. So like if I have a picture of my dog Ellie, I can put her in a project folder called Ellie, but I can also put her in a project folder maybe called Christmas, right? At the same time, or family and Christmas, or you can have multiple projects that where the photos can be in multiple different locations, but it doesn't add any space to your hard drive. It's just a sort of a separate index. So I feel like this is the direction I'm going to go long term with organizing my photos, is using the projects. And Lightroom has a similar thing. They have folders. Uh, I think this is the direction I'm going to go. So I'm going to import things the way I've always been importing, by year, quarter, day, and then labeling the day if I can, but then assigning pictures to specific folders in a project so that I can find them earlier. So if I want to look at self-portraits that I've done over the years, I don't have to remember what year did I take that portrait in. I can just go to my portraits folder, find it very quickly, right? So that's what I'm going to do. And you could do the same thing with drone photography. Uh, and I used to do a lot of keywording when I was using a Lightroom catalog. And that helps a little bit. So you can do keywording on top of your folder structure and project structure at keywording. Then you can't find something using by combining those three methods, I don't know how much more I can help you, because that should be able to you should be able to catalog and find anything, because key is finding things quickly in any kind of uh, data asset management that you're going to be doing. And I found projects makes the most sense to me. Assigning things to projects. Uh, After projects, assigning things to keywords. Now for importing, so that I don't overwrite or duplicate things, I try to do chronological. Right? So chronological is more of a computer reason. I don't want to accidentally overwrite files that have the same name potentially, because you know how that is. Sometimes you take pictures, but then the file names are exactly the same. But if I separate them chronologically, I'm not going to run into that problem. So that's why I import them by year, quarter, day, so that I don't accidentally overwrite other images. And then once I have them imported, I projects and keywording to kind of organize them. Uh, Checking the chat here. I guess hopefully the audio and video is still good. I thought I saw a comment about, yeah, there's something about buffering. I don't know why that keeps happening. That's my, yeah, YouTube is timing out occasionally. I don't know why. I don't know if it's YouTube or if it's my streaming software, because when I watch Robin and Jimmy live streams, they don't have this problem. I have good connection. Okay. And oh, Seraphin, you're going to get a ZF and a couple lenses, and then keep the OM5. Yeah. Let me know how that goes, man. That ZF, it's kind of tempting to me a little bit, tiny bit, but not as much as uh, Panasonic S1R. That camera tempts me quite a bit. DF doesn't tempt me because I have a Nikon DF um, that shoots the vintage lenses, right? The D series lenses. Um, and here's a comment about the OM5 is easily broken on a tripod socket too. Henry Turner broke his in a week or so of having it. Okay. Everybody's getting mixed things. I mean, the the key to not breaking your mount, regardless of camera, is don't put too much stress on it, you know. And like I said, every camera I get a bottom plate. You know, like here's my Pen F, full on bottom plate. If I'm gonna mount the tripod, if I'm not gonna use this with a tripod, I take this off and just sit bare or put a leather half case on it. But if I ever think about using a tripod, I always put full plate on the bottom. That just helps distribute the you know, my Fuji full plate. It just distributes the pressure along the bottom. Um, yeah, the OM5 is that's a great camera. I would love to have an OM5. I would get a used one, but the problem is the USB, right? You cannot run the camera off the USB port. That that is something I'd like to have in my next Olympus camera. I don't want to buy another OM1 or EM1 to do that. You know, I'd rather have like an OM5 type size to do that because right now what I do like with my EM10 and the EM5 Mark III is I got dummy batteries that I plug in, which is effectively the same thing. But I have to leave the battery door open to put the dummy battery in. It just I just don't like that, you know. I'd rather have an all-in-one solution with a USB-C port that can run the camera. So hopefully the next OM model will do that. You know, my Fuji does that because what I can do, well, it's just a little more clumsy when you're using a dummy battery than if you had a dedicated USB-C port. Occasionally buffering and buffering. Wow. Then Roger says, should OM redesign their pro lenses to a smaller form factor? The small is better for the system M43 shutter. Well, basically what you're talking about is making the 1.8 primes weather sealed, right? Uh, but pro lenses, it's hard to make them smaller if you want like the f1.2 and if you want the perfect, clinically perfect image reproduction. It's, you know, lens design, I'm not a lens designer, right? But uh, I'll be one here for the live stream. I'll play one on TV, so to speak. Uh, and the reason they were limited to that number of pieces of glass, because they certainly could make lenses that had 8, 10, 12 pieces of glass in them, like modern day lenses. But the problem was, is back in the 40s, 50s, whenever they were making those lenses, is they didn't have lens coatings to reduce reflections. So anytime you had a gap between two lenses, you had a lens element here and a lens element here, light would reflect off of the surface of these two pieces of glass inside, thereby causing ghosting and flaring, right? So even though they could correct for aberrations, right, where the focal length or the wavelengths of light to meet on a flat surface, right, so you get a sharper image, the problem is you increase the reflections and softness are like those lithography type lenses. I mean, they're the size of like a small cannon, you know. They have tons of elements in them. They're big, huge, and heavy because they have to be able to draw micromillimeter type circuits onto a board because the way they make circuit boards is through a photographic process. So those lenses are huge. So they're because they have to make all of these corrections so that a beam of light is perfectly straight. And we're talking about monochromatic light. We're not even talking about color, right? And you have to start dealing with color, then you're dealing with even more lens elements to make corrections because the wavelengths of light hit the sensor in different points because they're at a different frequency. So they have to correct for that so that the red and the green and the blue, whatever the colors are, come together to the same point. And without those corrections, that's when you start to get the chromatic aberrations, right? Where you see the green and purple fringing uh, on the lenses, in the images, I should say. So a pro lens has a ton of elements in them, all of these corrections, so you don't get the chromatic aberrations, right? They have like special coatings to reduce the ghosting and flaring that you would get internally off the lens. And then they have minerals, or they have uh, different types of glass that have different elements in them uh, that also have a different effect on the wavelength, right? Um, and they have fluorite glass, which is not even glass; it's like they have fluorite in them. So there's all of this technology that goes into lenses, but ultimately, with the current lens technology, it's very difficult to make all of these corrections, without adding elements and size to the lens. The other thing is, if you're going to have f1.2 or f1.4, whatever, the entrance pupil, right, for the light, because f-stop is basically the amount of light from the subject, how much of that light eventually reaches the sensor plane, right? So that f-stop or f number basically is saying, I have this much light over here, I got this much light over here, right? And that difference. And basically that number is fixed, right? It's fixed. It's the entrance. What is the formula? It's something like it's the focal length divided by the uh, aperture using the diameter. Is that right, or is it the other way around? Let me just do a quick math thing. Like the 600 millimeter divided by it's an f6.3. All right, so um, yeah, so that's what I did, right? 600 millimeter lens, the new one from Olympus is a 150 to 600. It has a aperture at that level at 6.3. Is 95.2 millimeters. If you look at the front element of that lens, or the filter ring is 95 millimeters. Now we have to account for some variance here, right? It's not exactly the front, the entrance pupil of the lens is not exactly 95 millimeters. But then, and that's why that lens is so big. There's just no way around it. It's a very simple formula. Focal length, right, divided by the aperture. So if you want a 600 millimeter lens at f6.3, the front entrance pupil, it's not necessarily the front element, but very close to the front element is what they consider is how much light passes through, right? Has to be a 95 millimeter diameter. So it has to be that big in the front. And then let's just pretend this is that lens. Because the lens zooms, right, in and out like this, the 150 to 600, this whole barrel has to be bigger than 95 millimeters, right? Because this has to go inside. And let's see how far does this go. This is here. So this lens retracts almost all the way back into the very back of the lens. The 150 to 600 is pretty much the same as this, just bigger, right? So if you want, so you cannot make the lens any narrower here. The only opportunity to make the lens smaller for micro four thirds is either in the length of the lens, right? There's some potential there, but then there's compromises when you make the lens shorter. With there are exceptions, right? Like the Nikon 300 EF lens, which uses I think a Fresnel lens inside. I don't know if there's any compromises to that, but they definitely made the lens shorter. But anyway, uh, because with a smaller sensor, you really don't need quite as much light to go through the lens to achieve same exposure, right? Overall, the total, what they call, I think, the light flux, right? I'm getting way over my head here. Anybody, feel free to correct me where I'm. Everybody, double check everything I'm saying here. I'm just explaining it the way I understand it. There's just no way. It's a very simple formula. The formula for focal length is the distance between the front element and the sensor plane. Theoretically, that has to be 600 millimeters, but in practice, I found a lot of lenses are shorter than the actual focal length. So they're achieving that through some sort of magnification inside, right? But I don't know if there's any compromises to that. That said, even if Olympus, because there was some talk about why that they can make a smaller micro four thirds version of the 150 to 600, and I just don't see how that's possible. The way I understand lenses, and I cannot find a single example of the exact same focal length in full frame versus the exact same focal length in APS-C or micro four thirds being significantly different in size and weight. If you look at your f4 lens from Nikon, the original AFS lens, firstly, exactly the same as the uh, Olympus, very similar number of elements. I mean, it's virtually identical. The only difference is on the rear is the mount is smaller. So, you know, I think it would have been. I don't think it was a mis. I think by Olympus outsourcing the bulk of that R&D, meaning they're just using an existing design from Sigma and adapting it for use on Micro Four Thirds, makes a lot of sense. Now there has to be some additional. Uh, there was a lot of additional work in the software to get the image stabilization to sync with the camera, and I assume some other optics and coatings. There might be some minor changes there in the manufacturing of the lens. I really don't know what they did to justify charging so much more for virtually the same lens. Uh, but it is what it is. If you want that lens, it's 2,800 bucks here. I think that's the list price here in the US versus say $1,500 for Sigma in any other mount. Why Sigma doesn't just make Micro Four Thirds version for us, or I'm sorry, 56 millimeter, those primes don't have image stabilization in. So it's very easy to adapt those to any mount, right? So you can buy those lenses for APS-C and Micro Four Thirds. So I have the 56 1.4 for my Fuji. Awesome lens. I guarantee it'll be awesome on Micro Four Thirds if I bought the Micro Four Thirds mount. But I don't need 110 millimeters for anything, right? Uh, but it's a but on the Fuji, it's a nice portrait, right? But can they really make the lens any smaller? I don't know. I don't know if they really can or not, because the front element has to be that size, right? Let's do one more example. Let's do 600 millimeter f4. Just ignore this outrageous price. Go here. Let's see if this holds true here. Specs. So before I look at the specs, 600 millimeters divided by 4, f4, 150 millimeters. Wow. I seriously doubt the front element is that big. Filter size, 40. That's, I don't even say what the size of the front element is. All right, let's do one other one, 300 millimeter f4. So here's a Fuji 70 to 300, 5.6. So 300 divided by 5.6. So 53 millimeter front entrance pupil, right? What do they say here? The filter ring is 67 millimeters. And if you look at the front of the lens, you can see that the filter ring is all the way out here, 63 millimeters. You take a little bit off. The front entrance pupil is about right here. So that's probably 53 millimeters right in here. That makes sense, right? This is the front entrance pupil right in here, just inside the front element. They just, how about the 300 millimeter f4? Here's the Zuiko, so we'll add that to compare. Sigma 300 f4, we'll compare this one. And then where's the Nikon one? 300 f4. Oh, this is the PF. The PF is kind of exceptional, but compare these four. So here is the filter size. All of them are 77 millimeters. Regardless, full frame or Micro Four Thirds, right? Oh, you can't see. Turn this off. And let's see, this one, the Olympus is 3 pounds, 3 1/4, Pentax. Wow, that's really light. 2.35. The same. That's the entrance pupil, or close to the entrance pupil. There's just no way around f4 and focal length. Now, what's interesting is the overall length. Look at this PF lens. This is 5.81 inches long versus 8 point, so it's about a third less. But look at the AFS. It's 8.76 inches long, and the Olympus is 8.94 inches long. It's the same length, but the PF lens is kind of exceptional. And look at the Pentax. This one is 7.2 inches long. Interesting. This is an interesting lens. Why is this so small? Internal focus, that's the same as everyone else. My point is about this part right here. The front entrance, the length. Anyway, there's a couple of examples. So going back to the 150 to 600, I can't find any examples where the Micro Four Thirds version is really any smaller, particularly on the telephoto side. You always have to take into account the f number, the aperture versus the focal length, and it's always going to be exactly the same for any sensor format. The difference is on the internal glass, how much light you have to actually throughput relative to the sensor size. But to get the same amount of light from the subject to the sensor plane, there's no getting around how much light you have to bring in to begin with, right? You want the same amount of light to hit the sensor. It has to be how lenses are designed. But, I'm dangerous if you give me a couple of formulas and then show me some examples. If this Pentax lens thing that it's kind of small and lightweight. That's cool. I got to check that out. Um, this is cool. Marco just sent me this link. Yeah, I've seen this before. I was thinking about buying the little lens kit that has all these different concave, convex lenses. Yeah, I was thinking about buying that kit. They sell it on Amazon. I forget how much it is, or maybe it was on Amazon. I saw it somewhere. Things that affect the overall length of the lens and the number of elements that you need are the spherical lenses, right? But those are extremely difficult to make, or at least they used to be. Uh, but to make a good quality spherical lens, so you can reduce the number of elements needed to get the same image quality, that and have floating lens elements inside too. Sometimes, there's things that they do that offset the overall size of the lens versus the image quality of the lens. But ultimately, with current lens technology, we're pretty much stuck with adding element after element, and to add multiple spherical elements, that's even possible. I know I've seen lenses with at least two. Um, uh, it does reduce the overall number of elements you need, but still, you're going to need a lot of elements to get perfectly clinically sharp images. I don't know why the buffering is so bad. Really sorry about that. That would explain why the stream is down. Well, partially. It could be just my conversation is why nobody's here. Let's see. Um, Rob, would you consider a medium format 100 megapixel cover all your pro work like real estate, or does full frame suit your workflow better? Honestly, for my work, my professional work, Micro Four Thirds, the all-in-one is all I need. Because ultimately I deliver 2 megapixel images. For the events that I've done, the OM1 is more than enough. Oh, the only reason I have these other cameras is just gas. Just had to see uh, what does 40 megapixels do? What does 60 megapixels do? Um, and they're nice cameras, but for my work, honestly, for everything, I don't need more than my Olympus OM1 can deliver. Uh, Certainly, the other cameras do deliver more resolution, more dynamic range, more flexibility, all of that kind of things that you would expect in a larger format camera, but they're not things I need. You expose everything correctly and all of the good things. Just doing photography, you don't need really much more than even a cell phone, really. But no, I don't need. I would never consider 100 megapixels uh, unless if I got into heavy, what do you call it, product photography, or had an agency where I was being hired through an agent, things like that. I might consider getting one, but I can't imagine I'm anywhere near that level of needing that kind of equipment for any kind of professional work. I don't know why there's so much buffering. Hairpin is phasing out. Fuji and Nikon. Yeah, nothing wrong with that, man. They're great cameras. Like I said, I really do like my Fuji. I really want to get out and shoot with it more, but oh, I just can't. I can't find the time. I end up grabbing my Pen F most of the time when I want to go out because it's so compact and this this is very, very compact. Let me just don't see. Better put this back together before I lose everything. But the 18 to 55 kit lens is about the same size as this 33 1.4. It's like which one am I going to take? I don't know. I'd much rather take this out, my day-to-day stuff. But I do need to take the Fuji out more. I took it out for one photo walk out in Shenandoah when I first got the camera, and it was beautiful. But um, oh, please hit the. Oh, thank you, Bob Bauman. Appreciate that. Okay, well, find a new 75 1.8. I guess it's only used for those older lenses. I know what you mean? I'd be surprised if you couldn't find one. Um, I don't know where you are geographically. They seem pretty readily available. They got one at B&H, one at MPB, of course, eBay. Use Photo Pro. Oh, this is a good deal. 380 bucks for excellent condition. Hmm. Anyway, uh, hey, Yeah, definitely don't buy new. If you can buy a used one in excellent condition from a reputable source like MPB, B&H, there's a few vendors on eBay that are really good. I would do that. I'm looking at a 15 millimeter 1.7 right now. It's going for about 350 sometimes, but I'm trying to get it down to 300, then I might pull the trigger. I spent four hours in Copenhagen with my IR converter EM10 Mark II and 8 to 18. It was so enjoyable and fun. Yeah, one that were donated to me. I took it out a little bit when I first got it, but I haven't done anything with it since. Just get overwhelmed sometimes with all this gear. I don't know. There's so much to do in photography. I just don't know why. I guess it just it's hard to do it all. In your humble opinion, I'm still using an old i5 2500. Oh, okay, we're talking about computers. Does the new Photolab editing software need more power? Yes. If you want to use the D Prime XD, the regular D Prime is pretty demanding. If you're just going to do regular editing without, and then cherry pick the ones that you're going to use the D Prime, you'll be okay. But for me, I deep prime everything. Uh, I would not be able to do it if I had an old i5 2500. Because if I recall, that's a dual processor only. 12 gig is enough, but everything around that system is old and slow. Um, yeah, I mean the best way is just edit one image at a time first, see if that's acceptable, right? And then do see if you need to bulk edit things, like when I do my paid jobs, I might bring in 200 images, then bulk process all 200 with D Prime XD, and that can take about 30 minutes on my computer, and this is like state of the art. I would not be able to do that on an old i5. Hey, let's say we'll see you later. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Plato's heading out. Everybody's heading out. Oh no. Oh, well, that's probably because you can't see me. We're looking at lenses. First, the views went up when I took my face off the stream. It's okay. Did anyone have any other questions? Oh, I didn't talk about the OM1 Mark II much. I would get the camera if money were no object, but because money is a problem these days, I just can't buy it. Otherwise, I would buy it. But I just sunk my money into this Fuji system and this Sony system. It would be a bit of a stretch, and taxes are going to be due in a couple of months. That's always kind of a chunk of change. Otherwise, I would get one. I love the fact that it has a deeper buffer and that new graduated ND filter. That's going to save me from having to bracket shots all the time to some extent. So those two features I really like, and that the high res mode is now 14-bit, and that fact that it's 14-bit doesn't make much difference. I mean, I get enough dynamic range out of 12-bit to be honest, more than enough with that. But that's just kind of a little perk. Those two things, I think I would upgrade just for those things personally, but I can't afford it really. Even if I traded my OM1 in, I'd get like 800 bucks for it, maybe if I'm very lucky, 700 bucks. I'd still be out another 1500 to buy that. Oh, I just can't do it. I think Eric's got the right idea about waiting. Uh, this this is a good time if you have the OM1 Mark One. This is a good time to skip one model and wait for the version 3, right? The OM1 Mark III. I think that's going to be the upgrade to do. if I upgrade now to the OM1 Mark II, that is money I could have used to upgrade to the OM1 Mark III instead. So I think that's the route to go. That's my advice is if you have an OM1 Mark I now, skip the OM1 Mark II and get the OM1 Mark III later. Just use the heck out of your OM1 like I'm going to try to now. Uh, I mostly use my Pen F when I go out now. I'm going to try and take my Fuji out more and maybe the Sony, but when I go out, I never pick up their Sony. I always pick up my Pen F. Bottom says for him, the human detection and grad ND are the most important. Yeah, the human detection, not so much for me. I rarely take the picture of the people's back of their heads, you know? But I don't do enough people photography to really appreciate what human detection might do for me. Because maybe you're taking pictures, take a picture of this person just when they turn around, right? And face you. If it's already kind of in the general area of focus, it only has to move like a microfraction to just get that extra pinpoint sharpness. Maybe that's where it's going to help click for me because I've just never. I don't know if you guys can explain to me why you would take the picture of back of someone's head. I'd love to know, but I like the fact that they move the human face eye detect into the same menu as the animal, bird, plane. You know, now it's easy to kind of just toggle between the two. I toggle between the two now, because I assigned the animal detect or bird detect to a button, so I can toggle that on and off. So it goes between face detect and animal detect. But it's nice. It would be nice if it was in the menu that way to begin with, and I wouldn't have to do it that way. Yeah, it doesn't anger me, but I need to wear out my own one bit more. Yeah. Yeah, there's some people who are really upset, man. Uh, really upset about the OM. I'm like, honestly, nobody's forcing you to buy the OM1 Mark II. They're not putting a gun to your head and say, buy this, right? Don't buy it if it doesn't do anything that gets you excited. Now, if you have an EM1 Mark III and want to get into birding seriously, you're gonna have to think about getting the 300 f4 or 150 to 600 with it. That makes sense to me, right? But OM, but I think the people that are most upset are people that have the OM1, like myself and you, others. That the OM1 Mark II was not like a leap forward, right? I'm okay. I'm like, it's okay. So they're selling the same. What if there was no changes? What if it was exactly the same camera, except for the branding on the front, like the uh, that 9 to 18 lens, exactly the same lens. They just changed the branding, right? I don't see anybody screaming and yelling about that. So, so they're giving us the same camera with the OM brand on the front, and with a few minor upgrades. Honestly, they're very very niche upgrades. Not many people would. There's people that are devoted wildlife action photographers. People are devoted landscape photographers, and these updates are a big deal. Makes sense. I'm more of a generalist photographer, right? I just do everything, everywhere, all the time, like that movie, right? Everything, everywhere, all at once. That's me when it comes to photography. And there isn't any. I wouldn't use any of the new features enough to justify upgrading my OM1. I'm okay. I'm not mad. I don't know why people are angry. Don't buy it. If it's skip a generation. Isn't that the advice though all the time? Just always skip a generation, like with cell phones and cars and everything else, right? Just buy the OM1 Mark II. Nobody's forcing you. My goodness. Let's all take a breath and focus on our photography. If the camera they released is not good enough, take a break and focus and get your and focus on your photography, right? I think that's the best way to look at it yeah, let's be glad that we don't need to buy this camera and focus on our photography rather than worrying about spending money on more gear. Um, I guess. Uh, these 8 months, therefore, human detection would help. I wonder. I wonder if human detection and baby detection would be different, though, right? Human detection, I think, is looking for adult humans, arms and legs. Man, babies are really small. I try animal detect on a baby. That might work. Their arms and legs are very short relative to their torso, just like a lot of animals. And they have big eyes, right? Relative to their head. So I think animal detect might work really well for babies. I'm just guessing. I don't have any babies to practice on, but I think it's more passion. They want OM to succeed, and they want OM1 to keeping this. The upgrade isn't enough to wow people to sell their enough units. Yeah, it's basically upgrade camera for people that have the EM1, I think, and not the OM1. Uh, there's very few people. I'm gonna have a couple guests on next month where they're buying the OM1, no question. They love it, and they have the OM. I mean the Mark II. They have the OM1 Mark One now. And they've already pre-ordered and have their OM1 Mark IIs coming. Makes me want to get one, but I can't. I can't. My brain tells me not to do it, but my brain and my wallet tell me not to do it. But just my heart is like, oh, I got to get a camera. You know, I want it so bad. Hi from Thailand says, Let babies wear baby size business suits. That way the camera will detect they're in fact humans. That's interesting. Oh, this is for Andrew. Sorry. Uh, yeah, P's a private company, so we don't know. They don't have to disclose anything financially except to their investors. So if you invest, uh, and I assume you got to have millions of dollars to invest with them. I don't know, but they're a private investment company, so they don't have to disclose anything. Yeah, I think you're right. The All-in-One Mark II is basically replacing the Mark One only for branding purposes, probably, and then they threw in a few extra goodies, while they can. I just hope they bring a firmware update to the OM1 that some of the features like Live Grad ND. I think they could do that in firmware. Uh, I think the moving the menu button over to the trash button, you know, and then moving the face detect into the same menu as the animal and train and plane. Like those things should easily be done in firmware, and I would love that. I would be happy with just that. I don't need the enhanced autofocus, so to speak. If there are any benefit, if they can do anything, great. But little things would be nice. Just the little things. I don't need the big things. The autofocus is great already. I did events, mediocre light. It wasn't poor light, like a concert or something, but mediocre light indoors, people's houses, places, and it focuses just fine. And for bird and wildlife, my God, I can't imagine how the OM1 Mark II would be better. But OM1 Mark One is so good now. I mean, yeah, it's not 100%, but come on, it's so good. Hmm. Okay, well, I guess guess I'll wrap it up here. If there's no other questions, and I've kind of said everything I wanted to say, which is usually not much, but I have fun talking to you guys and seeing everybody come in. It's always great to see everyone come in, and I hope if you're new here, you'll be back again next week. I try to do these every week, and I'm also going to try and do more guest appearances, like for my live streams. So next month, I'm going to have a couple of people. I'll try and get one in this month. Scheduling is always a problem in February, but I'm going to try and get some more guests in next month. I think the annual meetup I did this year was awesome. Lots of new people there. I was so happy to have everyone. You guys have a great weekend, what's left of it. Go out and take some pictures. Like I said, don't worry about the OM1 Mark II. Take a break, work on your photography. I think that time is better spent doing that. So thanks for watching today. We'll see you guys again soon.